Okay, we got video is fascism, right or left? This is already an alarming question. This shouldn't be a point of contention. The fact that it's being framed this way is already a warning sign. Yes, you need to address nationalism. That is a problem. All right, let's turn off the music. And let's start our watch party. Now, this is a prime example of fair use. We are going to be dissecting this video as we watch it. So we are making something transformative out of this, which is one of the key test questions of a fair use case. Not everything that you see somebody do as they're viewing someone else's content is fair use, but we are going to be dissecting this video for its truth claims. We are going to be pausing and discussing. We're going to be taking notes, and we are going to be arguing against it. Fair use, prime example.
He's a fascist. For decades...
All right, red flag number 1, Dinesh D'Souza. Anyway.
This has been a favorite smear of the left aimed at those on the right. Every Republican president, for that matter, virtually every Republican, since the 1970s...
Okay. So let's, first off, let's point out, I'm just going to paraphrase it. True. There is a reason for that, and that's because the left-right dichotomy historically is about hierarchies. Where it comes from in French politics, it's about whether they wanted to uphold or tear down the traditional aristocracy. So the left, in a word, is about egalitarianism, and the right, in a word, is about hierarchy. And now I don't like to characterize the right that way, because I don't think the right likes to characterize themselves that way. I think it is like the classical division of egalitarianism versus hierarchy, I think, is a already pro-left framing. And it wouldn't have been back then, but we already have such a distaste for hierarchy. In the modern age, we are built on liberalism, that we are trained from the get-go to dislike hierarchy as like a thing to uphold, a thing to promote. So it's already pro-left, but just factually, like most leftist things. But I still like to give some level of credence to the right's own framing of how they promote things. And so I think it's less... has less implied negativity to it to say that the right is pro-propriety, which is what a lot of right arguments boil down to. They may not outright say this is a hierarchy and we defend it, but they will claim this is a value, we have to uphold it. They don't disagree with that, as far as I can tell. They think it is a proper value to uphold. So, true. Left supports egalitarianism. My God, I can't. Right supports hierarchies, propriety. Now, that means that the left, from their focal point, is facing political opposition against egalitarianism. And that means, and the other thing that the left is afraid of is that the right has a tendency to try to force viewpoints through the state. The left, part of egalitarianism is pluralism. So the left supports people being allowed to maintain whatever viewpoint they want to carry out acts as they would, so long as they don't cause someone else harm. Now, not only are they afraid of people having the opinion that they shouldn't be equal, they shouldn't have support egalitarianism, the right is afraid of that being a crackdown by the state. And that's a real threat. So the left does panic about fascism, about the state cracking down against egalitarianism with state power. So they do have a tendency to lean toward seeing fascism when it isn't there because they are wary. Now, egalitarianism, it means the equal treatment under the laws and the systems. Nobody should be treated more poorly by the state because of an immutable characteristic. Or, in most cases, even mutable characteristics, so long as those mutable characteristics don't cause harm to others. Now, this is a problem. It is, I would say, it is justified, but it is also a problem because you get Boy Who Cried Wolf. And can anybody point out to me the story with the problem of the Boy Who Cried Wolf? I'm sorry to treat you guys like elementary schoolers, but this is kind of important to a discussion on fascism. Shadow Wolf? The wolves finally showed up. That's right. And this leads me to the important point. When the wolf arrives, the fact that people are using fascist as a claim/insult does not invalidate the claim of fascism. So by the time we are here, this can no longer be allowed to matter. We can't worry about this anymore. Yes, the left may overcall fascism, but you can't use that as an excuse to ignore every call of fascism. The right loves to raise this as a point against talking about fascist policy. But it's not. It's not a point against calling out fascist policy. It has been wrong in the past, but it being wrong in the past cannot be in any way associated with whether or not it's right or wrong now.
70s has been called a fascist, now more than ever.
Now more than ever. The right is being called fascist now more than ever. I'll put this to the audience. Does anybody have any response to this claim? Is it justified? Is it unjustified? Is there a reason now more than ever, or is it just an overactive left? The right is being called fascist now more than ever. Is there any justification, lack of justification? All right, Shadow Wolf. We're having a law class here. Just open floor. Socratic method. Both justified and overreactive. That's my assumption of what you're saying. Fascist right. More active online. The entire right is lumped with them the same way the right goes. The entire left is all a bunch of communists. Okay. What I haven't seen is people getting too upset about being called fascist. They get lumped in with open fascists because they support the same system. Yeah, see, there's my first response to Shadow Wolf. Here's the problem. The left can identify certain tendencies or policies that are fascist, and we're going to get there, I promise. We're going to get there when it comes to MAGAism. But there isn't a communist political movement amongst the established left. That doesn't exist. So if the left is thinking that the mainstream movement of the political right is fascist, now we have a very different problem than when the mainstream right calls mainstream left communist, because there is zero justification there. There's nothing communist about the mainstream political left. But I think more importantly, you did hit a very important note, Shadow Wolf, and yes, fascists, more politically active. Fascists are also more politically powerful. Oh. Look at the Young Conservatives. That's the name of the group, right? Okay, quick heads up. What I'm about to dig into here is going to look like a long tangent. It's not. PragerU pushes unitary executive theory. All executive power in one person's hands. This is textually all good, but the problem comes with putting it in practice. Executive power today comes bundled with lawmaking and judicial power that should never be concentrated in one office. I needed to cover this before watching D'Souza hide the ball on fascism. About 10 minutes. Short version, anyone pushing for a stronger executive is not on your side. Distrust, then verify. If you want the why, stay with me. If you're not ready to learn about unitary executive theory, skip to this mark here. But even more striking is unitary executive theory. This was not mainstream back in the day. 20 years ago, this was not mainstream. It has been consistently gaining more momentum thanks to the Heritage Foundation. Thanks to, I'm not going to remember their name. I'm going to stop trying. But unitary executive theory has been gaining more and more traction amongst the political right. People tend to think like this is a normal thing to assume, that the president, the executive branch, is meant to have all of its executive power, all of its executive decision making isolated behind one person. And that is even more alarming when you take it away from that very textual reading of it and look to how it effectively applies. The scariest thing about it, Shadow Wolf, is when you apply unitary executive theory to the administrative state. Now, for those unfamiliar with how the administrative state works, the administrative state is a relatively new invention, and it is a product of modernity. Congress cannot be relied upon to make law about things that require specialized knowledge. They are just regular lawmakers. They're regular people. They're supposed to be regular people. They're supposed to come from the common stock. We're supposed to support our own in representing us. Now, that means that, just from a baseline, like, law is supposed to touch literally every part of our lives. How are you supposed to have somebody who's an expert on all of those parts of our lives? You're supposed to have an expert on law, on science. I guess science is way too broad of a term because, like, the administrative state touches on so many branches of science. Take, for instance, virology. Take, for instance, pollution. It's impossible for lawmakers to handle that on their own, at least under our current mechanisms. And maybe if we had a constitutional convention, we would need to reanalyze how we make law when so much of modernity relies on specialized knowledge. Now, Congress, we have gone through decades of lawmaking to determine how this works. Congress is able to create offices. Congress can create an office and imbue that office with the power to make law. It's not statutory law. It doesn't have the power of statutory law, but it has the power of law so long as it does not conflict with statutory law. That's where regulations come from. Now, the absolutely insane thing about the administrative state, about agencies, is agencies have lawmaking functions. They have judicial functions because they have to have the power to make determinations as to whether someone has violated regulatory law. So they have judicial functions too. And then on top of all that, they also have executive function. They are required to have the mechanisms in place to enforce their regulations. The people who are supporting unitary executive theory, I was just about to get there because now we've come to the complicated part. Who runs agencies? You have a Congress who has invented a form of government. And that form of government is supposed to have legislative, judicial, and executive power. Who runs it? Technically, we don't have a mechanism in the Constitution to determine like a special set of rules for the administrative state. And I think if we were to rewrite our Constitution, we would need to fucking do something about that. But technically, currently, because it needs somebody to operate it, these agencies have to sit under the executive branch. Now, the Constitution gives the president the authority to appoint all necessary people for like executive functions to fill those offices. And even more fun, no one is technically given the removal power under the Constitution. It's not in there. No one is given the power to remove people from offices other than through like impeachment. Now, that was read into the Constitution by the Supreme Court over a century. Like it was talked about on the floor of Congress before the 19th century, and then it was determined by law, by judicial law, by the Supreme Court, I think early in the 20th century. So there's a bunch of history there. And it's assumed that the president has removal power along with appointment power. If somebody has to serve at the pleasure of the president, then they also can be removed at the pleasure of the president. Now, when Congress invented agencies, sometimes Congress wanted to say, yes, but the president can't touch this. This is meant to be an independent agency, which makes a lot of fucking sense considering that we have given those agencies the power of lawmaking, of judicial decision-making, and of executing the law. Why would you give the president the power to remove whoever they wanted from that so that they can then put whoever they want in charge of it? That is incredibly anti-American. If you look at what American values are, like if you go back to what did we found this all on, probably in the number one slot is a distrust of executive power. That should be number one on your chart of like American values. So anytime somebody wants to believe in a powerful executive, that's an un-American person. think it was enacted during Andrew Jackson's presidency when he made all his friends judges and cabinet members and almost bankrupted the entire country. After that, the Senate gained the power to approve presidential appointees. No, the power of the Senate to approve presidential appointees is in the Constitution. Presidential appointments are with the advice and consent of the Senate. That's in the Constitution, like the base Constitution. It's the removal power that's in question. Now, so with these independent agencies, Congress came up with a system that was like for cause removal. In the case of these independent agencies, the president has to give cause for who can be removed, and in some cases, like explicit causes are given by Congress. And this was found to be constitutional way back in the early 20th century, or mid 20th century. Makes sense. You can't give the president all that power. No one man should have all that power, if I'm to quote American music. Unitary executive theory says, well, one of the primary things in Article 2 of the Constitution is it says, all executive power shall be vested in the president. Sure, that's fine. But if you give the president all power over agencies, all power over who gets to sit in those offices, then you're not just confining executive power to the president. You are also giving the president lawmaking and judicial power. That's why unitary executive theory is such a big problem. You are, like, I'll be clear. Congress has abdicated a lot of its lawmaking responsibility by putting so much lawmaking power in agencies. But when Congress abdicates that power, it cannot be picked up by the president. That is the makings of a terrifying situation. Thank you, Shadow Wolf. There we go. Now you see the problem. Now let me also point out to you that PragerU loves the unitary executive theory. So immediately, you should not trust them. Someone who believes in an empowered executive does not have your best interests in mind. No one who believes in an empowered executive has your best interests in mind. You should never trust such a person. Bear in mind, this will be the closest I've ever looked at them. Mostly, they just popped up on my YouTube feed. Well, see, that's why we're here today, Shadow Wolf. This is why I come in with a positive attitude about these things. This is why I'm willing to engage with every single, like, claim that we make, because we need to be willing to accept that we know nothing, and in that be willing to learn and not just absorb. If we're just putting on PragerU videos and just leaving them on in the background, that all we're doing is absorbing, and it becomes so easy to just not process. And like, they're also extremely tricky, as we're about to see. They're extremely tricky. So we can't turn our brains off to absorb this content. They soft pedal right-wing videos and shorts that suck people down into the algorithm. And Shadow Wolf, one of the things that I want to do with my Appeal to the Right series, which is not the first Appeal to the Right video that we're going to be focusing on, / videos we're going to be focusing on, is I want to explain to right-wing voters the amount of wordplay war that is played on them by their own representatives. They associate ideas with words, and then they ambiguate the words so that they can group different ideas together under the same umbrella, and then they treat those things under the same umbrella as equal. So they dishonestly broaden words to the point where they don't really have meaning. Okay,
This
we're
label
about to
is
see some
based on the
wordplay.
idea that fascism is a phenomenon of the political right. The left says it is, and some self-styled white supremacists and neo-Nazis embrace the label.
I wonder why that is. Like, it's almost like if somebody's willing to be the most disgusting version of themselves, maybe trust their own labels. Maybe not. That's not a good thing, because like Nazis will claim both being socialist and being far right. So it is hard to trust them. They're not honest with language either. So ignore me. It's not good to trust them ever.
But are they correct?
Use
To answer
objectivism.
this question, we have to ask what fascism really means.
Now we're already playing a trick. He has skipped over what is the left and what is the right. Now, let's go back to my notes real quick. Now, we already addressed this, but I did want to point it out as a separate comment. This is a wordplay game. It's not a wordplay game. It's just a different mental trick. So what they're doing here is they're not addressing what they mean when they say left and right, because they are relying on your preconceived notions. They are not going to address them, but they are going to use some word suggestions to link their claim to what your preconceived notions are, and it'll just inherently make sense. But the problem we're about to see is they are assuming you have heard and been raised with the idea that a large state, an empowered state, is a leftist concept, and that small government is a rightist concept. But if you ever actually examine that through the lens of what people promote, that is not true. The size of the government is not inherently a left or right concept. You have versions of both the left and the right that have small government and big government. The government can be entrusted with the project of promoting egalitarianism. I don't think that's a great thing to trust them with, especially when you're talking about a vanguard party. I greatly condemn the concept of a vanguard party. I don't think communism with a vanguard party is a functional concept. You can't trust people with power to give other people power. But the state can also be used to homogenize the subjects of the state. One example of a powerful state is a monarchy, and the monarchy is inherently anti-left. A monarchy is anti-egalitarianism. If we go back to the origins of the left and the right, being supportive of the classical aristocracy is pro-right. So, depending on what you're using the state for, a large state can be left or right. But that's immediately the trick they're going to. They are not going to talk about the qualities that make the right. They are just going to depend on your association of the right with small government. Evil alien robot, the worst part is, I bet they could. I bet they could. They could define left and right for you if they were pressed to do so. They're genuinely dumb. I never like to assume that my enemies are dumb. Now, Trump, I've seen that demonstrated in so many ways, but he is not the entirety of who our enemy is. Aliana's in. What's going on, Aliana? We're watching some PragerU here. We're doing some actual fair use content on this channel. I'll give you my thought on this definition. Left prefers a strong federal government and more social programs run by an overarching group. Right prefers a strong local government and less social programs. But sides, I believe, like a strong military for defense, but the left would be less likely to advocate said military than the current federal government. That's just the version of rightism that you are used to. What you're talking about is conservatism, not rightism. conservatism at its core is supposed to embrace a smaller federal government. But conservatism isn't the entirety of the right. Conservatism, most people forget, is a branch of right politics. MAGA is not conservative. MAGA is radical. Well, okay, all right, okay, all right. I just think it's an important factual point. It's a historical point. It is an academic point. If you look at academic definitions of left and right, the size of the government is not like a fundamental aspect of it. All right.
What is its underlying ideology? Where does it even come from? These are not easy questions to answer. We know the name of the philosopher of capitalism, Adam Smith. We know the name of the philosopher of Marxism, Karl Marx. But who's the philosopher of fascism? Yes, exactly.
This is wild.
You don't know. Don't feel bad, almost no one knows. This is not because he doesn't exist, but because historians, most of whom are on the political left, had to erase him from history in order to avoid confronting fascism's actual beliefs.
This is wild. I don't know how you can watch this video and not get red flags from this. Let's break this down a little bit. Oh, gotta scroll. Okay. No one? What kind of bullshit is this? You think that people who research, like, political history, people who research political philosophy, don't know who Giovanni Gentile is? This is meant to rile up the uneducated person watching the video. That's entirely what that statement is intended to do. And keep in mind, the person in the video, or the person watching the video, doesn't know who Karl Marx is. They don't know what Marxism is. They think Marxism bad, but they have no idea what it means. So is the person watching the video supposed to know who Giovanni Gentile is? And maybe there's a reason why, when we compare Adam Smith and Karl Marx to Giovanni Gentile, we get kind of a different result. Is that because no one is out here on a grand platform promoting the philosophy of Giovanni Gentile? People still promote Marxism. Of course we know who Karl Marx is. It also sounds foreign. Yeah, I caught that one too. I had heard of him before this, but I didn't know he was associated with fascism like this. I honestly cannot remember where I heard of him before. A stroke affected some of my memory. Yeah, but like, more importantly is this is meant to rile you up. This is conspiratorial language. It's meant to say, you don't know, and there's a reason why you don't know. Why do you not know? Now let's get into the next conspiracy. Academics are against you. Okay. So, the next one is historians, political left. Now, this is news to no one. The more educated you are, the more likely you are to be politically left. And if you know anything about how higher education works, how the scientific method works, how, I don't know what the system they have for it, like, I don't know if there is a name for it, but like, historical review, like, there are academics who review other historian academics' work. The systems that they have in place are designed to remove and condemn, like, just straight like fabricated opinion, unjustified statements. These people devote their lives to finding facts and deriving models out of facts. Historians make models. I don't know if they view it that way, but that's what they do. Just like scientists do. They go, based on the knowledge that we've got, this is the most predictive model we have that we could say, I think things were this way. And then if we do more research, find more facts, find more documents, find more historical record, find more archaeological finds, our current model should be able to predict what we would expect to find there. Historians have models. So when you say historians are overwhelmingly politically left, that isn't an insult to the left. That isn't an indication of a conspiracy. That is an indication that the left goes through greater rigor in reviewing their facts. That's all that is. What you are about to talk about is why I believed Maddie so readily. It is my opinion that the US media wishes to portray the average American as burger-eating dumb. That they want us to have an anti-intellectual bias so we do not question things, and the academics are against you as part of that. Oh, look, they hid facts because they think you are too dumb to find them. Right, that is not what they do. If they hide facts, then they can't, be celebrated in their own field. They have to put the facts out there, or their findings will not be justified. They will be failures in their own field. This holds up, but not out of conspiracy. Academia requires rigor. The left tends to hold their views up to a more rigorous lens. Yeah. Next. Erase him from history. This goes back up to no one knows him, but this is the fill in the blank section where it's like, no one knows him. Why do we not know him? Well, historians are mostly on the political left, so let's fill in the blank. If most of the left, or if most historians are on the political left, and no one knows who Giovanni Gentile is, why is that true? It must be because they erased him from history. Except all of them know who he is. And if anyone erased him from history, it was people not supporting fascism. Amazing. That in the video she sent me prove that PragerU was a corporation, not an actual. Oh my God, Shadow Wolf. This is not meant to condemn you in any way. Did you actually think that PragerU was a university? Oh, yeah, you followed that up, which you, I'm so sad to admit, you did not know. Oh my God, that's terrifying. Shadow Wolf, that's genuinely, genuinely terrifying. That is the design, but I didn't, part of my brain, protected me from that conclusion that people actually believed them saying that they're a university. Okay. To avoid confronting fascism's actual beliefs, and I guess it's time that we get there. Note from editing. This is probably where I should have just defined fascism myself. I kept expecting D'Souza to get there eventually. He does not. His argument from this point forward is, here's the philosopher of fascism. Here's a thing he said. Here's a Democrat who said something that sounds like that if you don't think too hard about it. That's the whole trick. I finally define fascism when it becomes clear D'Souza is never going to bother. That's at this timestamp here. I've left everything in order, but here's where we're going in case you want to jump ahead.
So let me introduce him to you. His name is Giovanni Gentile. Born in 1875, he was one of the world's most influential philosophers in the first half of the 20th century. Gentile believed that there were two diametrically opposed types of democracy. One is liberal democracy, such as that of the United States, which Gentile dismisses as individualistic, too centered on liberty and personal rights, and therefore selfish.
Holy shit. What we have established here is, without even explaining what Giovanni Gentile supports, what we know Giovanni Gentile condemns is left-wing philosophy. Liberty and personal rights, meaning for everyone. If you are to have liberty, truly have liberty, you would have to have liberty in the same way that everyone else has liberty. This is an egalitarian value. Personal rights is an egalitarian value. Personal rights means that the state is not able to overpower you in your exercise of your personal freedom. Personal rights, people don't tend to look at it this way. Personal rights are a guarantee of pluralism. If you have a personal right, so does someone else that isn't like you, unless the state refuses it to them. So if we are to have actual personal rights, if we were to have actual liberty, that is egalitarianism, that is leftism.
The other, the one Gentile recommends, is true democracy, in which individuals willingly subordinate themselves to the state.
Now, this is fun because this is something that I actually... Stop. Okay. This is something that I actually talked about with our Nazi friend on the channel. Not Super Jesus. Oh, the guy who goes by the Bad Goy. He was of the opinion that if you are to truly support a democratic view, then you are supposed to give the willpower over to the majority, and then the majority can decide to disempower, to disenfranchise, to destate anyone they want to. And yes, if you go for pure democracy, that is what you end up with. But that would not be a leftist ideal. If you are able to just destate people because the majority says so, that's not egalitarianism. That's not pluralist. That's why we have constitutional rights. That's why Gentile doesn't like personal rights.
Like his philosophy...
And just before I continue, this is why it's so important to have minority rights, because every single one of us is a minority. We are all minorities in our own system. It's just a matter of who draws the lines. There is something about you that makes you different from the majority of people, and you can always be cut out. If nothing else, you are a minority in lacking the qualities of some other minority group. Once you get that low, like, I'm not a member of this class or this class or this class or this class, I'm a member of the majority in all these cases. Well, guess what? You are now in a minority.
Philosophical mentor Karl Marx, Gentile wanted to create a community that resembles the family, a community where we are all in this together.
Oh boy. Hold on, let's back this up slightly.
Gentile wanted individuals willingly subordinate themselves to the state. Like his philosophical mentor Karl Marx, Gentile wanted to create a community that resembles the family, a community where we are all in this together.
Jesus Christ. What the fuck? I mean, I'm not even going to analyze the claim that he was his mentor. It's not like it matters. Brief clarifier. I should have gone with my gut when it seemed like D'Souza was bullshitting on this one. He absolutely was. As to whether Gentile even liked Marxist theory, I'll just leave this quote up from the EBSCO research overview for a moment. Note the word conservatism. And worse, Marx died when Gentile was 7 years old. One of the quickest Google searches in the world. They almost certainly never even met. Um, let's keep this rolling a
It's
little bit.
easy to see the attraction of this idea. Indeed, it remains a common rhetorical theme of the left. For example, at the 1984 convention.
Okay, so we'll stop it there. And we're about to see this is just lining up the dishonesty that's to come. So here we go with the conflation. Welcome to the right's war of words. We are equating two extremely different things through the most bare thread. The idea that we are all like family and we are all in this together. The problem is, even if Marx and Gentile use these exact words, we have already demonstrated that they meant vastly different things. I feel like I missed like a bit of a quote. Maybe it's still coming up, where he says that like Gentile believed that the individual was to be subsumed by the state. Like there was to be no more individual. There was only subservience to the state. You were meant to be a cog in the state. You were meant to represent the values of the state. Marx did not believe that. Marx was very much about the empowerment of the worker, the empowerment of the laborer over the state, because the state had a classic role in removing of exploiting the worker. Especially with the bourgeoisie, the state was an arm of the bourgeoisie to exploit the worker. Marx believed in empowering individuals to have more fulfilling lives outside of work, to be individuals. Gentile is expressed in this video to be opposed to that idea.
Convention of the Democratic Party, the governor of New York, Mario Cuomo, likened America to an extended family, where, through the government, people all take care of each other.
Gentile believed, again, that there was to be the state ideal, the state values, and everyone was required to reflect those state values. Saying America is like an extended family, now we have just looped the thread of modern liberalism, modern leftism, through this idea that they tied Marx to Gentile with, which was already a functionally incorrect comparison. And now we have through that tied modern liberalism to fascist ideology. But the idea of America being like an extended family where we take care of each other through the government, that isn't fascist. That is not a mandate by the state that all people be subsumed in their individuality into the ideology and values of the state. This is still a pluralist idea. As long as it is pluralist, it isn't fascist by definition. Shadow Wolf is wholly on board now. I love it, Shadow Wolf. I love it. It's valuable to go through a video like this, claim by claim, and see how they do it. Light Spectre on YouTube chat says, it's interesting that the Prager content is factual, but delivered in such a weird, subtle bias way. Right? It's this dishonest framing, tying ideas together. Thanks, Shadow Wolf. I love that. I love to hear that. And I love that you put it as you learned a lot with me. That's my goal. We are learning together. I don't want to hold a position of teacher, just like somebody that you can learn to learn along with. Because I didn't watch this video before today. I saw you share PragerU and go, oh, fuck. It's a shame that ADHD isn't up in here also watching this content with us, because ADHD was very opinionated in the Discord chat also. They know exactly how to frame these things. They are professional propagandists.
Things changed. 30 years later, the
Nothing's
slogan of the
changed.
2012 Democratic Party convention was, "The government is the only thing we all belong to."
Oh, God. To this, I just want to say, I'm sorry. Is this not an American value? Isn't this what the people is? Has PragerU really just worked its way around to demonizing a central core American value in trying to tie it to the claim that we are all like a family, and that's what Gentile believes? Oh boy. And I realize now that Shao, I don't know if Shao is even here anymore. We haven't even gotten around to a definition of fascism. So let's pause. Say, what is fascism anyway? So, fascism is complicated in what it is. There is the ideology achieved, or ideology pursued. There is the mechanism sought, and there is the pathway to support. All of these things are required to get a full understanding of, oh, thank you. Love the participation. Too far. There we go. So you can get yourself that, like, the debaters love to go to the 14 points, the 14 pillars of fascism. 14 pillars of fascism is just a broader way to get down to the nitty gritty of explaining all of these things. But we can think of it more simply, at least to get a directional idea of what fascism is. And once we get down to the nitty gritty, then maybe we can, like, argue over, like, do we need to get better definitions for these areas? But the ideology pursued by fascism is a propriety mandate. Those that seek, those who have a fascist ideology have a belief of what is proper, what should be done, what values should be upheld, and these need to be carried out by everyone. A failure to support the ideals are if not a state crime, it is a moral crime. It needs to be condemned by society that people don't support these values. People will always point out, like the left, the left also wants to pursue their values, but the left would quickly jump to, I only want people to be supported in the areas that are factually provable, like, not supported. I only think that the state should be involved in promoting things that are factually supported. Beyond that, beyond what's factually supported, we can go to the value of what ceases harm the most, and that would still be factually supported. You could demonstrate harm. And then beyond that, allow the freedom to do whatever. Allow the freedom to do whatever, so long as it does not create demonstrable harm to someone else. And even in those cases, there's a weighing mechanism, because we have to allow for freedom, because ceasing freedom is its own kind of harm. But the right takes things like, I'm not going to strictly say religious, but things like religious values, things that are not demonstrably harmful to anyone. When you say, like, we want to allow gay marriage on the left, a fascist ideology could say, no, no gay marriage because it is foul. That is a sense of propriety. It is not based on like a demonstrable harm. It's just what is proper, and we are going to enforce it. Some religious beliefs are very harmful, but we also believe that people participate in religious beliefs voluntarily. I don't agree with that entirely. I've dealt with a cult in my personal life, so I know that there are definitely mechanisms in place to force people to do things that are religious without what I would call voluntary action. But it's kind of a, like, at least in American history, something that we have to uphold, that the idea that what one practices in one's own mind is voluntary and they have to be allowed to do that. The right wants to take things that are not demonstrable and force other people to uphold them. Then the mechanism sought is a vastly empowered state in terms of what the state can do, what the state can reach. You know, if we're going to stick on religion, like America has banned, was it religious tests or religious oaths for public office holders? A fascist movement might try to undo that, require that, like, office holders in the government take religious vows. And then the state also requires that every member of society pay a tax to support the church. That was outlawed in America from the very beginning. Attaway, Shadow Wolf. Way to own being wrong. Being wrong is great. Prayer in school is the easy one. Forcing my kid to say under God. That is a fascist ideology. That is a fascist practice of the government. That is not to say that our government is fascist, which is another thing that we have to differentiate here. When people call MAGA people fascist, they are not saying they belong to a state that is effectively fascist. They are saying they belong to a fascist movement, and the fascist movement pursues fascist motivations. The people who forced Bible curriculum into Texas schools, fascists. And then the pathway to support is where it gets really complicated. And this is just getting down to, do we really need to differentiate between fascism and other forms of authoritarianism? But fine. Fascism specifically gets into mythologizing, nationalism, militarism, populism. These are the major factors that go into fascism. They create a state mythology talking about how the state is better than everyone else, and they are better than everyone else for a mythologized reason. It gets circular. They believe in the power that the state can demonstrate, because something about power makes us feel safer and more secure, and so it lets us trust in the state more. And then populism is like, we drive this grassroots fervor to like overthrow the old establishment. The state doesn't have our interests in mind. We need to represent the people versus the state. And when you frame things that way, you allow the people to give their power over to someone who does not want to represent their power. Faux populism. It's mythologized populism. The mythologizing, I think, is the key to fascism. Right, Umberto Eco. And I like to try to keep things simpler than Umberto Eco because people's eyes glaze over. I just wish that they would stop making my kid say, well, not that they're making her, but pressuring her to say under God at school, and I wish they would stop making her pledge allegiance to the flag. I think pledging allegiance to the flag is anti-American as hell. I think we could take a moment each day to recognize the state's duty to us and not our duty to the state. Because we make the state. Part of the American project is that this state is an instrument of our power. So what allegiance do we owe to it? It owes allegiance to us.
They might as well have been quoting Gentile.
I agree, D'Souza. That's the face I'm making right now. Am I a serious person? Can people take me seriously? I hope people take me seriously. I don't feel very serious right now. Didn't he make, was it 2,000 Mules? Was that his documentary? What a hack.
Now remember, Gentile was a man of the left. He was a committed socialist.
I'm sorry, what? Selective populism. The people, conceived monolithically, have a common will distinct from and superior to the viewpoint of any individual. As no mass of people can ever be truly unanimous, the leader holds himself out as the interpreter of the popular will. Fascists use this concept to delegitimize democratic institutions they accuse of no longer representing the voice of the people. Yeah. It's just
For
a 5-minute video.
Fascism is a form of socialism. Indeed, its most workable form.
I think we can just let it run.
While
at this
the
point.
socialism of
Well, no, we
Marx
can't just let it run,
mobilizes
that's
people
not
on
fair
the
use.
basis of class, fascism mobilizes people by appealing to their national identity as well.
So are you saying that Gentile's form of socialism isn't egalitarian? Are you saying that Gentile's form of socialism justifies a hierarchy?
Well as their class. Fascists are socialists with a national identity. German fascists in the 1930s were called Nazis, basically a contraction.
They also weren't socialists. This is a point that I got into with our local Nazi. He claimed that his core ideal, which was something that I forgot to get into with Tim last night. There are certain questions that I like to start off with, and I got too excited about having a voice chat call, so I didn't get into it. But I like to ask people what their core ideal is. And for our local Nazi, he said that his core ideal was socialism. Fascism is socialism with national identity. I mean, the whole claim here is just that fascism is big state, and big state is left, so fascism is left. And that's just all kinds of wrong. But the guy was saying that is what was said, Maddie. You heard it correctly. Or that Gentile, who is the father of fascism, was a socialist, and he believed in socialism with a national identity. That's at least what was said. They may have exactly said what you said. But our Nazi, at the end of our conversation, I got to the point where I was like, you realize that a national socialist is just a bad socialist, right? Because with socialism, like, you believe, and we touched on this, I got him to agree to this statement, that you believe that with collective power, that people can get greater benefit out of collectivizing that power than they could get on their own. And that is the greatest benefit and the greatest ideal of socialism. And by becoming a national socialist, you are cutting out people who want to add to the collective power. So you are just shooting yourself in the foot for no reason at all by being a national socialist. So the concept of national socialism is itself just propaganda. It is a way of justifying nationalism. It is a way of justifying fascism. It is not real. It is not a real form of socialism.
Of the term National Socialist. For Gentile, all private action should be oriented to serve society. There's no distinction between the private interest and the public interest, correct?
To serve society, but what society? Not a pluralist society, but society as the state, as the determiner of what is proper, believes should be served. These are different concepts. These do not all fall on the left.
Correctly understood, the two are identical. And
Correctly understood, the two are identical. I'm gonna cry.
who is the administrative arm of society? It's none other than the state. Consequently, to submit.
The administrative arm of society is a very interesting way to frame that, considering like what we just went back over again. But sorry, what was I saying right here?
State.
The administrative arm of society is the state. This is not true under Gentile's view. Under Gentile's view, the state is the determiner of society. The state is the one that decides what society is, and everyone must conform. Yeah, I know they think National Socialism is actually left-wing because they think socialism is left-wing, but they don't realize that they don't believe in socialism.
Consequently, to submit to society is to submit to the state, not just in economic matters, but in all matters. Since everything is political, the state gets to tell everyone how to think and what to do. It was another Italian, Benito Mussolini, the fascist dictator of Italy from 1922 to 1943, who turned Gentile's words into action. In his Dottrina del Fascismo, one of the doctrinal statements of early fascism, Mussolini wrote, "All is in the state, and nothing human exists or has value outside the state." He was.
And so this is the point that Maddie was getting to, where it's like faux populism. It is the selective populism. This whole paragraph Maddie wrote, where the fascist leader calls themselves the voice, the interpreter of the will of the people. So the state, in claiming to be a voice of the people, becomes the voice without the people, and the people have to adhere to the voice. Well, I meant that you posted in chat. Sorry, I didn't mean to steal credit from Umberto Eco.
Was merely paraphrasing Gentile. The Italian philosopher is now lost in obscurity, but his philosophy could not be.
Hold on, I thought he was erased, not lost. Is he erased or lost? Did someone get rid of him?
More relevant because it closely parallels that of the modern left. Gentile's work speaks directly to progressives who champion the centralized state. Here in America, the left has vastly expanded state control over the private sector, from healthcare to banking, from education to energy. This state-directed capitalism is precisely what German and Italian fascists.
Jesus Christ. God. To say that the modern left ideology is exactly the state-directed capitalism that the German and Italian fascists implemented. That's wild. That's just a wild, gross statement.
Implemented in the 1930s.
I feel like we lost Shadow Wolf at this point.
Leftists can't acknowledge their man Gentile because that would undermine their attempt to bind conservatism to fascism.
All areas that need capitalism as far from them as possible. Hell yeah, Shadow Wolf. That's right. Well, with Shadow Wolf's prompt, let's go look at those categories again.
To progressives who champion the centralized state. Here in America, the left has vastly expanded state control over the private sector, from healthcare to banking, from education to energy.
This is what I'm talking about. Egalitarianism versus propriety. Why should banking not be regulated? Why what is the proper function of the health insurance industry? Why must they exist? State control over education? Wait, now hold on. What? What are you talking about? What are you talking about when you talk about state control of education? Who's doing that? What? Who made colleges drop curriculum out of fear? That's crazy.
This state-directed capitalism is precisely what German and Italian fascists implemented in the 1930s. Leftists can't acknowledge their man Gentile.
I'm sure they know they're dog whistling that to some viewers. God, why won't my chair move there?
Because that would undermine their attempt to bind conservatism to fascism. Conservatism wants small government, so that
no. Fascism is a right-wing ideology. It is not conservatism. Conservatism isn't fascism. MAGA isn't conservatism. MAGA is fascism.
Individual liberty can flourish. The left, like Gentile, wants the opposite, to place the resources of the individual and industry in the service of a centralized state. To acknowledge Gentile is to acknowledge that fascism bears a deep kinship to the ideology of today's left. So they will keep Gentile where they've got him, dead.
Then why do I hate him so much? Why do I think he's so awful? That's odd. If only I could vocalize why I didn't like his ideology. If only. Is he not talking to us? What do you mean, Shadow Wolf? PragerU doesn't talk to the left. He's not talking to us. This content isn't for middle schoolers. This content is probably for 19-year-old men mostly. 19-year-old white men and people who could agree with them politically.
Buried and forgotten. But we should remember, or the ghost of fascism will continue to haunt us. I'm Dinesh D'Souza for Prager University.
I'm worried about the zombie of fascism haunting us, not the ghost of fascism. Ghosts aren't going to hurt me. The zombie might. Okay. Anyway, I'm KnowNothingAttorney. I know nothing, so you can too. Because it's only in embracing that we know nothing that we can actually learn anything, and we are always learning on this channel. We are always learning together, and I appreciate you guys for bringing learning to me.